I wonder where she went. Hello, Boggatha. How are you today?
Oh, doing fine.
Would you like to give me a museum tour?
Sure. Leave your preconceived notions of the normal world at this very threshold and enter the world of the mysterious, the unusual, and the odd at BoggOdd Oddities Museum. By entering the museum, you agree. Management not responsible for any and all incidents herein, including but not limited to never-ending nightmares, cork recoil, hauntings, unexplained darkness, bursts of light, unconsciousness, illness, egg receivings, egg hatchings, hair shearing, blood loss, possession, sheep infatuation, animals appearing, disappearing out of thin air, hearing loss, clothing loss, implanted thoughts, spider infestations, drowning, itching ears, or itching clothing. Oh, right this way.
Oh my. It just keeps getting longer and longer.
I've had incidents. The dock in our central hall may be familiar to you, as it was here when we built the auditorium. This dock was one of the many meeting places for the honey smugglers, thieving guild, and appraisals. It didn't freight in honey, though. That was the diversion. We hear they smuggled human hair. It was prized for its softness over horsehair, for stuffing the mattresses of the nobility. The honey smugglers are fortunately said to have left these waters and abandoned this operations dock into its current state of disrepair. We still hear occasionally someone awakens to find their beautiful hair has been shorn to the scalp. Could it be the honey smugglers still in secret operation? We may never know until someone is awakened by the clicking of the shears to see who is responsible. Keep your ears open tonight while you sleep.
Did anybody else hear clicking of shares?
No, I had no such thing.
The noises this museum makes.
Behind me here hangs the mystery of Lockiesk, the lass of the lake as she was known. Her existence was only mere conjecture, being seen only occasionally by a spectator whom no one believed. She was eventually spotted by a crowd gathered to watch a rowboat race. It is said that her eyes can read a person's intent, helping her elude capture for over 100 years. At the rowboat race, a blind dog fell overboard from one of the boats. Believed she took pity on the poor creature and guided it to shore. The mob took no pity on her, however, as they wrestled her to her end while she was distracted. She has been preserved as a trophy and was handed around to the top-performing student at the primary school, where she was proudly displayed over the beds of generations of school children, as she was thought to bring them the gift of foresight.
Definitely the foresight to run away.
Uh, Over the last of the lake hangs what was once a plated shield horn, the only one known to exist. It came to us by way of an oddly tall fellow who said he had Cyclops blood in his family history. This shield horn was his favorite, as it had formed an extra thick plating on the top of its head as it grew. It lived a long, full life, battering many unsavory creatures from horrific islands. The extra tall man did attempt to breed this trait into his other shield horns, but he was never able to replicate its unusual plating with any other of his stock. He continues breeding the offspring to this day in the hopes that if he's lucky, lightning will strike twice in his stock. Before you here hangs a rare species from the depths of the deepest trenches, believed to be a distant cousin of the shark. This monstrosity was known as the fanged sea slug. The front-facing eyes allow it to see well, even in the deepest of depths. It spends its life on the floor of the ocean. Its body has no fins or flippers. It is an undulating globular mass with eyes and fangs. To make up for its lack of speed, its flesh secretes a powerful venom. It is believed the venom surrounds the slug like a vapor, and any wayward beast coming too close will first lose its senses and then begin a merciless dance with death.
How teeth does this, or fangs, would you call them? The slug
Quite a
has.
few. There's quite a few. There's another row in there. There may be 2 more rows in there. It keeps going down, down. Relative of the jellyfish, this beast is known as the sea drifter. The 2 black eyes on the top of the head allow it to see well in all directions. The wide rudder-like body and the vertical fins allow it very fast, extreme maneuverability. In the water, the protrusions along the bottom, which resemble teeth, allow it to open its favorite delicacy, the giant sea clam. Dropping onto the clam, it can use the fins at each end to spin as it rapidly lowers itself into the shell, cutting through and slurping out the gooey innards of the clam. It has been rumored the sea drifter will occasionally drop onto the head of an unsuspecting diver. Before the diver can react, it has already moved the top of the skull and slurped out those gooey insides.
It's creepy.
Oh yes. I don't do the diving anymore. I don't even drink the water. Up next, we have a piece of actual battle-used ephemera. The bull seed was designed by an industrious general as a way to maximize the amount of troops which could be moved at a time. The bull seed allowed the troops a chance to rest and then charge into battle with full energy, making them a very fierce competitor on the battlefield. It is said the furniture was collected from what the general could find from a war-ravaged town. The bull seat was pulled by an actual living bull, and it is said that his fear of this second bull charging behind him drove him full speed into battle. Missing from the bull seat are the blinders that the general rigged to stop the living bull once they had reached their destination. The general's army sometimes dismounted the bull seat, but would sometimes use it as a mount from which to fire upon their enemies. The bathtub located at the center of the device is said to have had multiple uses. It held food and beverage, could be used by many standing troops, but was also used to pile the bodies of the fallen, injured, or otherwise. If you see any staining in that tub, here it's wine.
Definitely wine. Not blood. You can't call it a blood bath.
No one said blood. The chair on display here started as a warming chair for the Lord and Lady of a frozen island. After a long evening of drink and entertainment, the Lord and Lady took to this chair to warm themselves before bedtime. Once they were finally awake, the servants helped themselves to the remainder of the drink. In the morning, the entire castle opened its bleary eyes to greet a new day. A pig was roasting on the fire, and its scent wafted through the castle. Midway through preparing the table for the feast, the staff realized there was no pig roasting on the fire. They proceeded with the day, finding it odd the Lord and Lady had not called to begin their morning. They searched their bedchambers, but found them empty and unused. They continued searching for the Lord and Lady, beginning with the last spot they were seeing, the throne room, in this warming chair. When they cracked open the doors to the throne room, the origin of the scent of delicious pig was discovered. The Lord and Lady, lulled on a cloud of drink and warmth, had fallen asleep in the warming chair and been slow roasted in their slumber.
I think a lord did a sniff test. I think he kind of eased in like this.
Lord, wondering if we knew the identity of the Lord or Lady.
Yes, and I think it was Lord Hugo who identified the Lord as Lord Crackle and Lady Pop. I believe they had a son named Snap because he went crazy in the end.
Yeah, we don't have any confirmation of any of this, however. The tour continues this way.
Oh, delightful.
While the current version of Cyclops is prevalent now, there once existed an even more fearsome armored Cyclops. Standing before us here today are the remains of a rare life-size statue depicting the Cyclops from days of old. It is said to have been sculpted of clay from a Cyclops island with the additive of ground human bone. The ground bones are supposed to add both a strength and a feeling of unease for humans who passed beneath this statue's original enormity. It is also rumored that if you look closely into the very front of the toe of the boot of the Cyclops, you may be able to see the astonished look on the faces of those who were defeated, and whose bones make up this very statue.
I saw it through my spyglass. How creepy.
That is creepy. An island with a lone sleepy hamlet was plagued by house fires. In the middle of the night, at random times, a house would fall to ash. The villagers knew what was to blame, for when they moved to the island a century ago, a creature lies smoldering in the caverns of a ravine across the island. Before us here hangs a reassemblage of what is left of the Dawn Racer, as she was known to the villagers. Only active at night, the villagers would take to their homes to avoid contact with the fearsome beast. Known to light the sky with the flames of 1,000 lanterns, roosters would actually crow out at their perception of the arrival of morning light. The village had sat unbothered for 95 years, so what had inflamed the Dawn Racer? They held a meeting and realized a family had been venturing into a forbidden area, upsetting a unwritten pact between the village and the dragon. The family was picking a wildflower which only existed in the valley, known for its unequaled medicinal healing properties, in order to treat their sick child. Though it was forbidden, it was worth the risk to them. Their violation led to the family's banishment from the island. A trap was set for the errant dragon. She was successfully captured, and a great roasting feast was had, where even the strips of her flesh were given to the villagers as a souvenir of a successful end to their nightmare. 1 week later, the first cannon shot destroyed the home and took the life of the town leader. Awakening the town in the process, they realized the island was overrun by a remorseless doctor and a hired band of mercenaries. For you see, the dragon was the only thing keeping them from looting the island of its priceless medicinal plant. In fact, on the nights they would arrive under the cover of darkness, she would hunt them in order to protect her villagers. The mercenaries could not find a way to defeat her without trapping her first, and they couldn't build a structure for risk of their plan being discovered. So they began to set fires in the hopes that villagers would help them defeat the Dawn Racer. All beneath a beautiful country estate lies strange fate for those unfortunate enough to have encountered a pair of mad noble women. They had a secret which would have run the blood cold of those near aristocratic circles they kept themselves in. The mad women had developed an unusual diet preference. Human toenails. Half-hearted soldier, drunken sailor, or sea wench, they were all preyed upon. The ladies went into the dark night to round up victims. They would wait outside tavern and dance hall for those inebriated enough not to put up a fight. A bag over the head and about 6 spins around was usually enough to knock even the stoutest person unconscious when they had been plied with enough drink. They would be locked into the chambers here on each side of me, their feet scrubbed, cleaned, and their toenails carefully trimmed so as not to waste an ounce of the precious resource. Know what you're wondering? Why not just pull them out at the root? After all, it's the sensible thing to do. Well, the sisters weren't monsters. They were just very hungry. Each victim awakened, dumped on the outskirts of town. Shoeless, sockless, pants rolled to the knee, but their feet were beautifully scrubbed, and their toenails perfectly trimmed. The sisters were caught when they mistook a pair of sleepy officers for inebriated and were overcome by them. Threatened with having their toenails pulled out at the root, it is the sensible thing to do. They confessed to the entire ruse. Afterward, they fell from grace and out of high society. They took on new identities where they began to work in a wash house, trimming the nails of those who came to bathe, thereby continuing to feed their insane and insatiable hunger. Now that you've worked up an appetite here on our tour, I'll bring you to our next stop. Behind me is seated the long-necked crow. There's no need to fear the pulling of your organs through your flesh. This crow is a strict vegetarian, feasting only on fruit and veg. This crow has wonderful breath. While not every long-necked crow has the ability to become invisible, this one does. While being carried on your shoulder, this crow may disappear at will. Have you run to your larder only to discover it's missing the turnip water that you crave? If so, an invisible long-necked crow could be to blame. This is also the grazing point on our tour, if you're in need of refreshment. Please step to the crow's larder here. May or may not currently be vegetarian.
Delightful. You had some of the pork pies.
Existing in the push and pull of life is never easy, but we're fortunate if we get to choose which direction to move in. The elephants here were born connected at the trunk, found wandering alone on their desert home. They had been abandoned by their family, but were taken in by a nomadic group. It was determined not to separate them, lest one of them lose a most important appendage. They were eventually discovered and purchased by a traveling circus. Their most famous task was together drawing a large amount of water into their combined trunks and spraying it over the heads of the audience. The constant confinement, coupled with the rote task of spraying water night after night, drove them over the edge. On the night of their escape, they lifted the bucket of water, slammed it into the head of the ringmaster, crushing his skull, and with their combined trunks, propelled his body higher into the tent than the high wire racked. They made it out of the circus grounds into the edge of the woods before they were set upon by the circus crew, who shot them dead as punishment. Their heads were preserved and exhibited with the casket and body of the former ringmaster in order to continue to tell their tale. You're welcome to crack open the lid and take a look at the ringmaster if you like.
Okay, Boggert's gonna be brave. I'm gonna do it.
So it continues through the doorway.
Did you know it had a green booger in there?
That's probably not good. That poor ringmaster. He's been through a lot, you know. No, this is not a tavern filled with delicious libations. In fact, if you had been here 50 years ago, you would be dead. It wasn't unusual a long time ago to place additives into your spirits to give them an interesting afternote, be it bitter, sweet, or bittersweet. It was an unusually crowded evening the night before and would be again at a combination inn and tavern. The tavern keep was too busy to go out for the ingredients for the top note to add to the drink for the next evening. The tavern keep's sibling was sent to pick up the rare, delicious, green sweet ingredient, Magistine. The herbologist, however, was also out, and in their stead their apprentice was working. The assistant herbologist mistook the requested Magistine for the more common pest remover, Maggot Stem. Nearly identical in appearance and flavor, coupled with the unfortunate similarity in name, the switch was made. The Maggot Stem was delivered to the tavern and used to give the libations their signature smooth sweetness. As is custom with a spirit house attached to overnight accommodations, the drink poured heavily and quickly. The hallucinations began an hour into the evening. The vomiting began shortly thereafter. Ingestion of maggot stem was said to produce hallucinations such as liquid running down the walls, inanimate objects breathing, skies filled with flying animals, and the mistaking of human form for animal. The chaos of the visions, coupled with the vomiting, began a putrid battle within the tavern, where all fought for their very lives. Any who made it outside were driven back in by the visions in the sky. Those victors who survived the vomitous battle were said to have lain unconscious on these very floorboards until their hearts slowed to death.
So those floorboards been stained.
The case behind you is a donated item. It is the short-necked vulture. Eating only meat, this is a counterpoint to the vegetarian long-necked crow from the grazing point on our tour. This vulture is said to peck human flesh, has a preference for blood, and is able to see in and is most active at night. Were this short-necked vulture to have been allowed to continue to breed, the offspring could have become a menace to human comfort. So it has been secured for all our safety. Do still feed it late at night from our day's rattlesnake kills, and we each take turns, allowing it to run its beak along our arms. It is in no way unhappy. In fact, it is now more serene, and the pecking of human flesh has been reduced to just a cursory first nip.
So what's going on with the stage here?
stage was put in, but underneath the stage lies the coffin of the final husband of the widow of Shallow Creek. She was called the widow because she had buried 12 husbands. 11 were deceased. She begged for help from the townspeople as she said she was being haunted by the vengeful ghost of her most recent husband. The widows of the town vowed to help her and formed a group which would sit in the home of the widow while she tried to rest. It was a quick rotation, for you see they all eventually stared straight again into the eyes of the man they used to know. Each night someone sat with her just before the skies began to lighten. There was a shuffling behind them. One after another, widows fled the still darkened, creaking home. Once that group was exhausted, the widows still pleaded for help. The young single men were sent next, as they were thought to be less prone to fright. Same story, however. They all ran for their lives after gazing into the eyes of the dead man. The oldest woman in town thought far too frail. Ask, may I go next? She sat slumped forward, next to the warm fire in the chair, eyes closed, back to the room, when the ghost appeared. His long, bony fingers reaching, clawing, slid up over the back of the chair and around the woman's frail, thin neck. From outside the home, a blood-curdling scream that chased wolves back to their dens was cut short. The townsfolk worried for the frail lady, but humoring her, had kept their ears open for her call. A number of them reached the steps of the cabin at the same time and clambered to the front door, flinging it open. Standing tall over two bodies was the frail old woman. But no one realizes the oldest woman in town was also the wisest. Unable to sleep well in the cold night due to her old bones, she slept during the warm daylight hours. Every night, though, she watched the dead husband of the widow of Shallow Creek creep into house after house in town. For you see, as people went to sit with the terrified widow, her very much alive husband was looting the houses of those who came to help her. He would arrive later to scare them back to their homes and then show what he had taken to his wife. The oldest woman went prepared, however, rolling pin and sleeve, in order to expose the ruse of the widow of Shallow Creek. Don't panic!
Should I panic? I think I should panic.
No, I don't think so. Hanging before you is only a cast representation of Snake's belly plant. It's named Snake's belly due to its appearance, but also the lethal, toxic pollen it emits when in a blooming phase. The belly portion seen here, concealed in the ivy, grows like a lichen and blends in very well with its surroundings. The plant grows new roots each cycle. And when the new portion reaches maturity, it dries like a husk and splits down the center, revealing a series of petals, such as you see on each end here. Thought to only inhabit a few islands, the pollen, if inhaled, will cause an immediate headache, followed by confusion. It is said the confusion stage is followed by an internal heat and thirst that, coupled with the confusion, often leads those exposed to dive into the nearest body of water, swimming down, 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 and staying underwater until they drown themselves. A traveling explosive salesman was off ship and plying his wares on a bustling island. He had already sold 2 cartloads of the explosives behind me, and was off on his 3rd round of sales. By his side was his trusted companion, Raspberry the monkey. The salesman didn't realize it, but he had slighted Raspberry earlier that day, accepted and ate an entire onion in front of Raspberry. The monkey was enraged, and swore to itself to take revenge against both his friend and the one offering the onion. The monkey got its chance when the salesman walked through the gate and up the steps to the porch of a home in town. Raspberry grabbed the reins of the horse, pulling the cart, and cracked them across the horse's back. Off they raced, straight back to the ship filled with explosives sitting in the harbor. Raspberry pulled both horse and cart over the warming fire on the ship's deck. The terrified horse bolted, snapped its harness straps, and dove overboard, with Raspberry still holding the reins. Both monkey and horse watched from underwater the magnificence of the fireball explosion. The ship was said to have shaken aground on numerous neighboring islands with its intensity. The explosions continued as house after house had their recently delivered explosives ignite. The remains of that island is now said to have a very large harbor, surrounded by a tiny strip of land, and has now become a turtle sanctuary.
We told the Godacotts about this story multiple times.
We tried. They didn't listen. They still kept breeding those monkeys and bringing them here.
Yeah, they brought one over here, and one of them got his tail stuck in the door.
Yes, popped too. In this case, it's a donated item. It is a real recent book, believed to be a spell book or some sort of information that required a powerful spell or curse. If you dare to open this book, as the previous owner had tried numerous times, you'd go unconscious every time. The owner of the book had it examined by high-ranking experts, and it was deemed to be a horror. It has been secured so as not to continue to plague the ocean or land. It is also thought to be possibly made of some type of human skin. Only adding to the book's atrocity. We, of course, have no idea of the contents of the book, as no one has made it past opening it. There's another book in that case, and the other book contains some sort of verbiage that we're not allowed to see. The owner gave us that book, but also made us promise that we would never open that book and find out what the contents were. So we have not read the contents. We can't tell you about that book either.
Is there some cells in there?
No, there's no cells in there. We tore those cells up. Boggert had been shredded. They got stuffed in there, but you know what happened to those cells. Those were naughty cells.
Oh, yes. The mutes just jumped right off.
They jumped off the cells. They didn't want to listen. The cells and the ship and the almost explosion and the racing into the harbor. There's a lot that goes along with that, but we won't get into that. We both know that story. The darkened cavern was the last place seen by those unfortunate enough to have run into the hogbat. Wayward explorers would stumble on their way into the cavern over the bones of those who had come before them. Known to have the insatiable hunger of a hog, coupled with the hunting prowess of a bat. The hogbat was a fearsome predator, graced with both venomous fangs and a row of thick, grinding teeth. It could devour a human in 3 to 5 minutes. Some of its victims seemed to be only a snack, while others were dessert. If you're not sure where you would fit in, we recommend prowling bone-laden caverns to find out. Keep your eyes to the skies as well, as there is no telling if this is the only hogbat in existence. The long owl displayed here derives its name from the 2 long crossing fangs and the 2 long toes on its feet. Related to the owl, the sad eyes of this creature hide its true nature. A vicious killer, it hunts humans for sport. The large club-like feet at the bottom have long toes which can wrap around a human neck. Once latched on, it swings its head wildly from side to side. One long mouth is located just behind the long fangs in the center of the face. This mouth contains 2 rows of fangs, as sharp as those exposed at each end of the mouth. It is known to latch on face first, so it can stare directly into the eyes of its victim as it watches their life fade out. Behind me here is the interior of the city office of the Butcher of Butterfly Lane, as he was later known. Shown on this table are the actual repurposed tanning tools that he used. Fancying himself a dentist, he was able to convince the local populace he was legitimate. Known for using a plant with hallucinogenic properties, he was able to cause patients to, in essence, mentally leave their bodies while tied to this chair here beside me. He would then remove all the teeth of the victim, promising only repairs to the teeth. It was so much easier to convince them afterward that all their teeth had gone bad, and therefore no work which he could not do need be performed. Human teeth were a prized and highly valued form of carotenoid, similar to bone but with a much sturdier structure once refined properly. The fraudulent dentist would leave his office early in the day, and that was thought odd by the community, considering how many of them desperately needed dental work. He had a nefarious reason for always leaving early. He was tainting the town's water supply with the ground-up squid innards. The innards still contain the powerful acid the squid used to break down sharp shells ingested in its feeding cycle, and even once ground up and dispersed, the innards still had enough acidic quality to weaken the teeth of the city dwellers to the point of needing dental work, and thereby supplying the dentist with the teeth he so desired.
The innards is what gets me.
A packed cargo freighter named the Sea Slicer sailed through a fog-shrouded sea. It lurched high and low, crates groaning at its side. On board amongst the crew stood a mere deckhand. As the ship passed through the shimmer, a mysterious event occurred. Every person, in fact every creature everywhere, disappeared, except the deckhand. Calling out for anyone else, he realized he was totally alone. In fear for the crates, the contents, and the ship itself, the deckhand began to panic. He didn't understand the workings of the ship enough to get it under control, and without a crew to pull the sails and manage the ship's wheel, it seemed a task that could not be accomplished anyhow. "Hello? Hello? Help!" he pleaded. His plea was heard by the only other thing that inhabited the world. The figure stood just before him on the other side of the cabin door, but he could immediately tell it was not human. It had no facial features. In fact, it had no features at all. The ship careened out of control, and just as the figure reached through the doorway, the ship crashed on the shore of a desolate island. The deckhand was thrown overboard and into the water just beside the shoreline. While running from the ship and the figure, the deckhand began to realize he wasn't breathing normally. With every breath he took, it grew shallower and shallower. The further he made it from the figure, the less he could breathe. The world grew darker and darker until he finally went unconscious. The deckhand awakened to find himself all the way back where the voyage began. But the cruise ship and cargo were never seen again. They say this shimmer figure waits just over the shimmer for its next crew. Will you be the only one it spares, or will you never be seen again? In this display is a donated item. We ask that you stand back from the chicken. This chicken was raised with a taste of death in its mouth. It is not interested in berries or breeding, only death. In the process of training this chicken for battle, it was starved down to its ultimate fighting weight. But it broke free, and it killed 37 people without making a sound. It has the ability to move without noise, and it prefers waiting until nightfall to become most active. In an attempt to appease the chicken's taste for human flesh, we have lined our troughs with food, preferably elephant marrow, and then our mutes have volunteered to take turns sleeping in the trough to flavor the meat with human taste, to hopefully keep the chicken satiated and as calm as we can. We are attempting to keep it here, so it will not strike again.
Good old Cluck Norris.
In the display below is the horror of Treacle Trench. The sweet name, Treacle Trench, belied the true nature of the area, a giant relative of the eel. This monster would grasp onto anything that's reached with pinchers lining its body. Pinchers operate in such a way that once they tighten down, they're almost impossible to loosen. This beast, as it approached its victim, would rattle the pinchers, making a clangorous noise, which served more as a victory chant than a warning. For once the clanging was heard, it was already far too late. Once latched on, the beast would spin over and over, dragging the victim underwater and shredding flesh from bone.
Popped corn with swilt butter.
Popped out corn with salt butter. Yes, I know that. That's a favorite of Madame Whistletooth.
Who's Madam Whistletooth?
Madame Whistletooth, she's the one that took the tour with us recently. She's the one that told us about the popped out corn. Now she has a preference for it. Maybe we'll see her. The unicorn fish prowled the depths of the coast of a storm-ravaged island. Once you descended into darkness, it was already far too late. The unicorn fish's worst enemy is the eel. The fish has a miraculous sense of hearing and is able to hear an eel at the length of 20 galleons. The sound of air as it travels through an air hose is almost identical to the hiss of an eel. The unicorn fish was known to thrash an air hose as it became more and more enraged by the sound, until divers were left gasping for air in the ocean's darkened depths. Many a soul perished by the horn until the unicorn was caught in a fisherman's net. Divers have now gone back to the comfort of a peaceful dive, but we have no way to know. Was this a simple genetic anomaly, or do others of its kind exist, waiting to leave the next diver, perhaps yourself, gasping in the ocean's depths? This poor creature's the last of the giant horned rhinos. Once known to roam the desert of a faraway island, its number has now been decimated to extinction. This rhino had the unfortunate accident of piercing a wooden barrel with metal hoops. The hoops made it quite impossible for the rhino to remove the barrel once it was firmly lodged on. This rhino was found dead of starvation, thirst, or a combination of the two, due to being unable to use its mouth properly. Even as giant horned rhinos go, this is quite the specimen, with the horn surpassing any measure to date, and with this one's death, will most likely never be bested again.
Poor thing.
The ocean was quiet and motionless except for the occasional creaking of sea-soaked boards of the numerous ships that dotted the seafloor like a grate. Each hull was pierced by what was first assumed to be the cannonballs of a marauding ship of war striking quick and true. The odd thing was, every ship that was sunk had no survivors. They were thought to have all been captured. An armored transport galleon, led by known drunkard Captain Halfway, was making its way through the dark and dangerous area. Carcasses of ship hulls unknowingly slid under the ship on the seafloor below. The ship was rocked by what was first deemed to be cannon fire, but when the crew tried to see them, there were no other ships present. Captain Halfway was called for with a knocking on this door before you. A non-fan of a drink or 8 before bed. He would often awaken late in the day, thinking the captain was slumped over the keg again. His second-in-command pounded on the door to no avail. He finally gave up and battered down the door to the cabin. He found the creature above, wedged between the hull and metal strapping, trapping it in place. It is the only horned shark known to have existed, and is rumored to be a remnant from the age of dinosaurs. We can only hope this is the last of those remnants. Captain Halfway was later found in the belly of the beast, cut and sliced, but still sleeping. They were able to stitch him up and place him in a new bed before he ever... At this point on the tour that we ask you, do not sniff the cork on this keg. That's the actual keg of Captain Halfway.
Oh yes, we had several people sniff the cork. We had to serve them, what is it called? The bean soup?
The bean soup served as a beverage, you know this. You ask me every time what the name of it is. Bean soup served as a beverage. I can't remember the name of it. What is it?
Known as coffee.
Coffee. Delicious coffee. I don't know why if you had a bean soup, why do you not just eat it as a soup? Why do you try to drink it as a beverage? It makes no sense whatsoever. The Great Northern Factory disaster took place on a particularly cold, dark, rainy evening. The main source of heat in the frozen north was a giant fireplace located beneath the smokestack here in front of us. That factory backed up to a large rock mountain, and the entrance to a great coal mine was built off of the factory into the depths of the mountain. The top of the mountain was a known habitat for an assortment of animals. The employees of the factory found a particularly large snake roasting on the coals late one afternoon and proceeded to prepare it for their dinner pot. It wasn't unusual for someone to bring whatever they had to share, although no one could determine who had brought the snake. They made a feast of the snake and went back to work. As the evening grew colder and darker, they placed more and more coal into the fire. What no one realized is that the snake deliciously roasting on the fire had chased a rather plump sheep from the mountain top. Snake and sheep both fell over the edge and landed on top of the smokestack. The The snake plunged further down onto the coals below, but the sheep was wedged high above the factory. Toxic smoke had already weakened most of the workers to the point they could not get out. By the time the panic began, all but 3 workers were killed in the tragedy, and the death toll was said to be near 458 lives, and would also remain the largest number of people killed by a single sheep for at least 2 more decades.
So, what happened after the second decade?
Nobody knows. We don't have that information. This invention before us is now one of a kind. It was originally invented by a medical spa. The spa had begun to suffer somewhat financially due to the lack of space for multiple tubs in their water room, as it was known. To maximize customer turnaround, the Geo tub was invented. The customer would bathe with a bar of soap, locking their midsection through the device. A candle was placed under the rope holding the weighted blade to rush the customer along. Unexpectedly, the Geo tub was a resounding success. The warm water, combined with the growing anxiety of the bathing customer, was known to sweat out even the deepest layer of grime, leaving customers with a clean they had not achieved in years. The device was so successful, it was soon sold to the home for personal use. The spa neglected to remember not everyone takes a bath with others present, such as they had at the day spa. The carnage of home users lighting a candle and sliding midsection through a device, locking themselves in, only to have no way to escape, resulted in extensive lawsuits from families of deceased users. The spa was bankrupted, and all versions of this device were demanded to be destroyed. This model was the one used as a research model by the enforcement brigade, who went door to door to ensure the destruction of all the other units. If you see staining on that blade, we've been told it's candle wax.
Yes, most definitely candle wax. Definitely not blood.
No one said blood. Don't mention blood here. Wild bears tend to keep to themselves unless they are disturbed, but that's not true of the cave bears of a mountainous region on a frozen island. The residents of the upper mountains grew tired of watching friend and family consumed before their eyes on their way down to the village below. To deceive the cave bears, they tried all method before realizing bears are almost blind to other bears of their kind and ignore them completely. The skin before you here is a cave bear skin, which has been modified by the residents. The bucket is tacked onto the skin from the underside. The stump is nailed to a piece of wood from below. The people would sit on the stump and hold the handle in front of them, their feet placed just behind the front legs. To descend the mountain past the caverns of cave bears, they would use this as a sled, to speed by the bears unnoticed. To return home, the pelt would be worn over the back with a bucket handle strapped under the chin of the wearer. One person could, while strapped into this device, elude the bears on the way down and back up to home. 2 people could also both ride and wear the pelt if necessary. This oddity was known as the dinner plate of Sir Vondel. Sir Vondel was a well-known fighter for a fearsome king. He was found many an evening huddled round his dinner plate. It isn't known what or who Sir Vondel had an appetite for, as the townfolk and the king were always too afraid to ask. Sir Vondel was eventually defeated in a brawler's ring set up to test the mettle of various competitors. The townsfolk immediately removed this horrendous dinner plate and shipped it to us for safekeeping. Here before you is a little-known rare menace. The toilet rabbit. Known to favor long, dark tunnels, it wasn't a large leap until this offshoot from the regular rabbit family emerged. It has developed a preference for the undesirable stench tunnels instead of its family's meadow tunnels neath the wildflowers. We've only encountered 2 of these in all of our travels, the one before you and the one still on the loose despite our best efforts to lure it out. I implore you to remember this refrain when nature next calls to you, when you need to take a sit. Stop and think a bit. Remember its sharp teeth, and be sure to look beneath. It is always wise to watch between your thighs. Is there a rabbit in your hole while you're warming up the bowl? Remember this refrain, and always, always look into the drain.
You said there was 2, one in the pit and one out on the loose.
Oh yeah, one on the loose.
But there may be multiple ones.
Don't know. I have no idea.
We did have an incident in the museum where the sheep knocked everyone unconscious.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Dragged a poor innocent soul into the Gia tub.
Oh, yes.
And when I woke up, I did see a bunny glowing over the other bunny.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that could be. Something could have happened there. You never know.
Yeah.
Could be more of them out there.
I did.
Haven't heard of any more.
I did hear a woman say that she was thinking about throwing these bunnies onto a neighboring island.
Yes, I haven't heard a story about them, though. I don't know that it was successful. Doesn't seem to be. I won't worry about that. I'll just worry about the one we know we have. Before you here lies the once prized possession of a mad count. Born on his estate, he had a bed made for the beast and himself, where they would both take to the bed for weeks at a time, engaged in full-on feasting sessions. It is said that the count could out-eat both heads of this beast on its best day. The count slipped further and further into madness as time and feasts wore on until he passed away late one evening. By the time they found what was left of him, they made a decision to put down the beast and preserve it as a warning, lest it woo another soul to their doom.
So it has two heads. Where does it poop?
Oh, we don't know that. We haven't investigated. We'd have to open her up. If we open her up, we have to tell you what we find in there. Probably don't want to know what we find in there. We have had conjecture that if there exists such a beast as this with two of this end, and nature has that way of evening the score, surely there must also exist a beast with the two other ends only. If that beast exists, we ask you this question. How does it gain sustenance? Where does it eat from? At first glance, before you appears to be a mere pile of garbage, but these objects were brought together as an act of deception. In its heyday, this heap was known by the family who crafted it as the Beast of Golden Isle. There were two entrances to the cavern. The main entrance lay hidden behind heavy plantings of trees and shrubs. There was also a second, very small, almost imperceptible opening at the edge of the water by the ocean, which helped to play into the deception. The second opening caught the air of ocean waves hitting the coastline, and the sound would echo through the cavern like this. Deep within the twisting cavern, a passageway lay hidden. Beyond the hidden passageway, known only to the island family, were heavy seams of unrefined gold. To keep that secret safe, they needed something fearful to stop unwanted exploration of the island. They created a myth surrounding the island of a beast with a horrifying ability to drain the life essence of a creature with a mere glint of its eye. For you to find the well-hidden entrance to the cavern, you would need to light your way further into the pitch black. Lighting your lantern, torch, or candle, you would make your way down a precipitous slope, attempting to hold on to slime-covered walls, keeping your gaze downward, as not to slide into a deep fissure lining the entryway. As the ground leveled out, you would look upward, only to sense the outline of something looming in the beyond. As you raised your light, the starbursts on the shield backs would illuminate like two eyes piercing through the darkness, combined with the effect was said to physically chill a person all the way to their core. The family is said to have made almost as much money selling shoes as refining gold, as explorers were known to run out of them in an effort to escape the beast of Golden Isle. That brings us to our very last oddity on our tour here today. Here before you is Hera, the oddity of Itch Meadow Farm. Born during a hurricane, it is believed that she was born midair the wrong way around. She has been utterly convinced that she is standing the right way up and cannot be corrected. She does not use her hooves and instead drags herself along the ground with her horns and wiggles side to side like a serpent in order to get around. She is able to see the berries on the underside of bushes that the other animals all pass over. So maybe she is a new adaptation of the species in order to fill a void. Her hooves must be filed down regularly. She does not wear them down naturally. She produces what her original owners at the farm referred to as the wrong way milk, and that it came out the wrong way around. We here call it swilk. It is said that by not hanging down into the udders and cooling, the milk is able to stay hotter for a longer period of time, thereby producing a sweeter, more mature milk with a caramel flavor undertone that is prized over regular milk. Here in the bag we have some samples for you if you would like to try a sample of the delicious swill.
Delicious swilk.
Oh yes, that concludes our tour here today of BoggOdd Oddities Museum. We hope that you have been able to learn some unusual things about the horrendous creatures that plague our oceans and land, and that you'll take away some warnings from our museum to help keep you safe in your travels. We've gone into partnership with our neighbors, the Furclads, this direction just down the shore, and they have a little restaurant where you can go and enjoy some of our swilk made into a new product called brim croulet, said to be lighter than air.
Oh, lighter than air, huh?
Oh yes, I've been directing all of our patrons that direction. But thank you for joining us here.
Yeah, thank you. So what's the painting over the doorway?
Oh, that's a drowned raccoon. That painting was painted especially for us by one of our visitors who then came back and wanted to give us a gift in the form of a painting. The drowned raccoon with a sad frown on its face. One side of the mouth hangs down further than the other, and in its hand it holds some sort of flame.
Ah, the seat feels so comfortable.
See, it is stuffed with human hair. Has a gentle scent of coconut. As the man who provided the hair was the one who he would always cover his hair in coconut, give it a beautiful sheen. He had hair that looked like it was always blowing in a breeze.
His name was George, wasn't it?
Yes, his name was George.
Thank you for taking me on the tour.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming today, and have a safe travels. Safe seas to you.
Oh, before I go, I just wanted to capture a memory of the yes book. Okay, Boggatha. Thanks for joining us.